wants to know when to start speaking, but most people ask this question too early, and that mistake has a real cost. Some English learners come to this channel because they want to speak English. That's the goal, and I completely understand that. Speaking is usually the hardest part, and it's the part that most people care about. So naturally, one of the most common questions I get is, Kia, when can I start practicing speaking? And this is my answer to that question. And I'm going to be honest with you, even though some of it might not be what you expect to hear. Speaking doesn't cause acquisition. First, and this is important, speaking does not cause language acquisition. And I don't say that to be harsh. I say it because understanding this changes everything. When you speak, you are using language you already have in your head. You are not receiving new information. You are just outputting what you already know. That means speaking by itself doesn't add anything to your language. You can't speak your way to fluency. You can listen and read your way to fluency, and then the speaking will be there when you need it. And I know what some of you are going to say, but speaking has real benefits. Now, I'm not saying don't speak, because speaking has a genuinely powerful benefit. When you speak to someone, they speak back to you, and what they say back to you is input. Input that is directly relevant to your life, your situation, your question right now. And because it's a real conversation, your attention is completely switched on. That is incredibly valuable. Conversation creates the best condition for acquiring the language you are receiving from the other person. So the benefit of speaking isn't that you're practicing output. The benefit is the input you are getting in return. Now, there are some risks to speaking too early. And here's what I want you to think about carefully. When you try to speak before you're ready, before you've had hundreds of hours of input, you end up producing a version of your own English, a version full of errors. And then you will hear yourself using those things over and over again. That becomes input for yourself, bad input. And your brain starts to build a model of English based on those errors. And those patterns can be very hard to undo. The same thing happens with pronunciation. When you start speaking before you really know the sounds of English, your brain fills in the sounds it already knows from your first language. And those connections form and they stick. You end up with an accent that takes real effort to change later because those sound connections were built before you had enough good input to build them correctly. Now, some of you might be wondering, what does this look like in practice? Okay, so I'm not saying speaking is forbidden. I'm saying be thoughtful about when to start. If you're a beginner, you don't need to force yourself to have conversations yet. Keep getting input, let the language build in you, let your ear develop, and let the grammar become familiar before you start producing it. Once you've had several hundred hours of input, once you can follow a massive English video at A1 level without much struggle, that's a good point to start gently speaking. When you do, here's one technique I like. Don't try to carry the conversation. Ask questions. Let the other person speak and listen carefully to what they say back to you. That way, you're getting a lot of input while producing little output. And I know for some people who don't have a choice right now and you have to start speaking English, I know some of you are in that position where you need to speak English right now for work, for life, for something urgent. I understand. And in those cases, speak. Do what you have to do, but just understand what's happening. You are going to develop some habits and patterns that will need you to adjust them later as your English improves. That's okay, and that's the trade-off. Just go in with your eyes wide open and keep getting input. Even if you speak now, the input is still the engine. Every hour you spend listening to understandable English is building the thing that will eventually make your speaking more natural and automatic. All right, so the short version. First, don't rush to speak. Speaking will come, and it'll come more naturally than you expect when you have had enough input. That's not a reason to feel behind. That is the method working exactly the way it should. Now, let the language build in you first, and then move on to speaking.